I have a hard time believing that all these people created their atrocities. If you were teaching
Yes.
these principles to people in a refugee camp,
Yes.
people who survived atrocities, who witnessed their family members shot by ISIS, for example,
Yes.
what more would you say to them? How would you explain to them what happened? Or at least, what would you say to me, someone who has worked with survivors and
All right.
wants to bring these teachings to them in a way that they could hear?
All right. Well, there are many approaches to this, and of course, the approaches may be different for different people. Yes?
Yes,
We can't necessarily give you a panacea for everyone.
I understand.
But the idea in general would be perhaps to begin with the understanding that what we're saying is not that someone necessarily wants those specific things to happen, but those things happening are the result of holding on to negative belief systems in general that then cause that to be the most probable result of those fear-based belief systems. That's a very generalized concept. But the idea also can be approached on a more individual level, and I understand that many people on your planet may have a challenge with this at first, that's all right. But by asking the question, what have you learned that you otherwise might not have learned had this not happened this way? And after that discussion, can you use your imagination to imagine some other way you might have learned this rather than that way? Because all these things are about learning lessons, and some of them are about learning the lessons of how not to learn the lesson that way anymore. The idea sometimes is that souls will choose to be born into what you call hardships and experience atrocities because many of them figure that through the idea of numbers, ultimately, if enough people on your planet go through that, will it make you stop? Will you finally get sick and tired enough of doing that way and change what you need to change so that those things don't happen that way again? How much more will you put up with? How much more will you allow to continue that you know will probably result in those kinds of experiences? When will you open your eyes?
Mm.
Is this making some sense?
Yeah,
Is this helping?
somewhat.
All right. I know this is a process, and again, I understand that there may be some challenges and some complexity to this and a process that you may have to go through. But it can begin for many people with what we have just said. Getting them to examine their own fear-based beliefs about their sense of worthiness or lack thereof can be a beginning. And again, please understand, it doesn't excuse a perpetrator for someone to realize that they need to take responsibility for their part in co-creating an experience that they may not prefer. That's not an excuse of the perpetration.
Yes.
Because it's up to the perpetrator to be strong enough to refuse the call from someone who considers themselves to be a victim.
Mm.
Because it takes a victim to make a victim. Do you understand? The chain must be broken by someone willing to finally take responsibility for their part in the co-creation before their eyes can be open enough to realize that the perpetrator is also a victim.
Yeah.
Yes? And when you understand that, you'll be able to break the cycle.
I understand it in myself. I've had a hard time teaching it to people who are themselves.
I understand
Identified
again
as
that it
victims.
may be a challenge for many people because of the belief systems they have ensconced within themselves. Because for many people on your planet, they have been taught that it's much easier to simply continue to play the victim card. But that's actually a belief in lack of self-empowerment. That's what it starts. A feeling of disconnection from source. It's important to teach people they are as powerful as they need to be to create whatever they need in life without having to hurt themselves or anyone else in order to attract or create it. It's about letting people understand how things work and that even when they feel out of control, the true paradox is they actually have to be in control to create an experience of being out of control because they're controlling that. And when their minds are open to the power of paradox and they see that they can never actually be out of control, but that they can use their control to create an experience of being out of control, and they see the difference between those two states, they will begin to wake up and take some more responsibility for what they create in their lives, or what they are afraid they will create in their lives, which is tantamount to the same thing as wishing it to be so. Because people who believe they are victims truly believe that in their heart of hearts and truly find themselves unworthy will go out of their way to prove it over and over again by attracting perpetrators who are too weak to refuse them, to drive the point home that you should feel sorry for them because, see, I was right, I'm a victim. Is this helping to dissect this a little bit further?
Yeah, I mean, part of the challenge for me is having worked around human rights, people working in the human rights field, who then have accused me of being blaming the victims when I try to empower. And
all right.
So there's this.
That's your challenge to find ways of describing what we're describing to you in this way. But that doesn't guarantee they will understand you, because again, sometimes those people shout the loudest who also believe themselves to be victims. But you may never get them to understand that, and that's all right.
Okay.
All you can do is do what you do. You share, you give people options. That's how you help. What they do with the information you share is none of your business.
That's right.
Because it's their path, and you have no idea what they may need to experience on their path. But I can guarantee, and you can guarantee, one thing. Whether they learn that in this life or not doesn't matter, because everyone is an eternal and infinite, indestructible being. And if they don't get it now, they'll get it somewhere. And it's not necessarily your job to say where, how, or when. Just give them the option and let them deal with it when they believe the timing is correct. And it may not be in this life. But as long as you've given it to them, at least it's in their toolkit. And maybe somewhere down the line in this life or some other level, they will sweep away the dust and see the beautiful gem that you have left for them, finally recognizing the gift that you gave them.
Thank you. Thank you. That's very helpful.
All right.
Another question I have is, there are those traditions, and I'm sure you've again answered this before, traditions that teach us that it's important to become free of desires. And
Well,
so
again, terminology may be confusing.
Okay.
The idea of desires, of course, like any word in your language, can mean positive and negative things. So again, if there is the negative use of that idea, then yes, of course, it's important to be free of that to some degree. But the positive use of the idea is tantamount to what we're calling passion in life. Yes. So you just have to understand how you're using the energy, not get quite so caught up in the terminologies that can go either way. Because different people may mean different things with different words.
Exactly, yes.
So understand the intent of it, the energy of it, and then you will understand what you're talking about.
So the negative energy of desires, is that the insistence on something? Is that what they're really talking about?
Yes, because you think you know better when you don't.
Okay.
And therefore you create this relatively negative attachment to things having to be a certain way in order for things to go the way you want them to go, as opposed to simply knowing that if you get what you need, you will be fulfilled. Because needs will fulfill you. Sometimes your wants may coincide with what you need, but very often on your planet, because of fear-based belief systems, the wants come from the idea of the fear-based ego. And what you want often will not necessarily align with what you actually need to fulfill you in life. So it's very good to understand the difference between wants and needs. Everything you need will fulfill you. Everything you want won't always.
Yes.
Make sense?
Absolutely.
So let synchronicity show you what you need, and you will be fulfilled. Does that help?
That helps.
Thank you.
I have one more question.
Do you now?
I wanted to talk about the heart and the mind. So some teachings devalue the mind, tell us that it's in the way of making spiritual progress. Is that the physical mind, the way you define it?
The physical mind is the physical personality, yes. It's the belief systems that make up the idea of, again, the emotions, the thoughts, the behaviors, yes.
And so how is the heart connected to the higher mind? Or
the higher mind sends a vibrational energy that the heart feels more purely because it's not yet filtered through the belief systems. But then it bounces, shall we say, reflects off the heart to the physical mind through the belief systems. And the degree to which the belief systems filter it so that it's not necessarily in alignment with the reflection from the heart shows the difference in how many negative belief systems may be being held onto by the physical mind. Yes?
Yes. And how is love and compassion, how's that connect? Is that are those heart?
Well, again, the heart does have a
higher
type
mind.
of thinking. And compassion is a recognition that those that are going through their own particular journeys have the power to do so, that you have to see them as strong enough to get through that journey, to face the challenges that they've created and attracted in their lives. That is having compassion. And the idea is that you know, heart to heart, that they are indestructible beings, and you can root for them in that sense, without necessarily agreeing with them in terms of what it is they believe to be true. That's compassion. You believe in them even when they don't believe in themselves. That's compassion. Does that make sense?
Yes.
And that is unconditional love.
Yes.
Which is the vibration of existence itself.
And that feels like the higher mind.
The higher mind uses that vibration, uses that energy, definitely flows unconditional support and love to you. It's a kind of a conduit for that in terms that can be understood in physical reality, which is why it translates as passion in you.
Okay, that's interesting.
Yes.
Okay, thank you so much.
You are so welcome.